buffalo soldier, tread like a rasta. There was a buffalo soldier. Good morning, Baltimore. Welcome to another edition of Money, Power, and Politics. My name is Robert DeShiel, and I'm here with my co-host Hassan Barnes. And as you can see, we have a special guest today. But before let me have my co-host say a couple of words.
Good morning out there, Baltimore and worldwide. Certainly, we have a great guest, former Baltimore Mayor, Mayor Sheila Dixon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, Sheila doesn't really need any introduction. She was mayor of Baltimore, president of Baltimore City Council, has been extremely active in promoting the interest of minority business for the last 15 to 20 years. Welcome, Sheila.
Thanks for having me. I'll just explain why I'm dressed like this. Friday mornings, I work out with my trainer, and normally I don't schedule things. I do square off, but I kind of put on a blouse. But
You're fine.
I got to get my workout, despite me injuring myself on Wednesday while we were training.
And I'll say for the audience, last week we had two doctors on who were from Baltimore. As you can see, I'm a Baltimore guy, so I always promote Baltimore City. So anytime someone from Baltimore comes on, is always a good day for us.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with one of the pressing issues. At least we hear it's pressing in the minds of the public. This idea of the problem of juvenile crime. Unlike crime overall in the Baltimore City, juvenile crime seems to be on the rise. What's your assessment of that?
So, by my assessment of juvenile crime and what's happening today stems from multiple issues. I mean, we've got to look at what's happening in the homes of young people. We have to look at what is not happening in our schools. I'll give you a quick story. My nephew, and he was a sergeant in the police department, and his partner, who was a lieutenant, had a program called Bridge, and they were dealing with young people. And of course, they used sports as a base, but it was not the entire program. They ran that program. They did academic things, mental health, which is a whole holistic approach. And I think about the fact that that program was ended. Harris ended the program. They, did a lot, exposed the young people to a lot. And I said to myself, let's go back and look at when the Bridge program existed and now, and see whether or not crime was with juveniles out of control. So, so there's a whole host of things. You don't want to lock up our juveniles, but there are issues that we have to address. Some of these very violent things that are happening across the state, not just in Baltimore. Honestly, these young people need help in a way that they're not getting it. Juvenile Services just made a new appointee. There are different legislation that was introduced. You have state's attorneys across the state who have been frustrated because of the process. But we've got to look at each one, uniquely to figure out what's going on in that household, what's happening with that young person, what is it that we could have done to do preventive. I believe in preventive measures. And I think that we don't focus enough on how can you prevent things before it happens. Back when that child was in elementary school, in the first or second, third grade, are there things that we could have picked up that would have helped to provide them with extra support before ending up in middle school and in high school and committing these crimes? So, I just think it's a holistic approach we have to take, and we've got to get a handle.
Have you seen anything take place recently which gives you cause for optimism that there is something that will impact the lives of these young people, or that could?
I'll be honest with you, I really have not. We can open up every recreation center in the city and in the various counties. I think that a lot of young people want to work and not necessarily at the age of 13, 14, 15 want to be in a rec center necessarily. My hope is that, that we will figure this out sooner than later. You know, back when I was a mayor and even city council president, what we did was we worked very closely with juvenile services. I remember I had a mentee. Back then, they would send them, depending on what the crimes were, to other states. And I remember my mentee, I used to go visit him daily, and he wanted to get his driver's license. So I helped him prep and prepare for his driver's license. My cabinet, my staff was a part of that process. We were in constant communication with the secretary. Of course, you know, we were working with programs throughout the city. Bill had some initiatives going on. I remember a principal in Cherry Hill. I forgot what the event was, but she was telling me about. She noticed that middle school young ladies were like getting out of control, and we took a small amount of money, and it was called Women in Action, where we were able to get individuals, women, to be mentors, and we wanted the worst of the worst young ladies in middle school, and they worked with those young people. Unfortunately, it wasn't Mayor Dixon, Women in Action. It was called Women in Action. But unfortunately, when something is successful, when it comes to politics, people want to get rid of it and not build on it. And that's one of the conversations I had on Dr. K's show yesterday about Pennsylvania Avenue and what was going on over there. There's a lot of positive things that have been going on in that area. And I was telling them that over the years, you have to build on success. And sometimes we want to throw it out, start over, or not look at what's going on in other cities.
Let me ask you, that's a good point you made. The issue of juvenile crime is not only in Baltimore, it's in DC, it's in New York, it's in Chicago, it's in Detroit, it's in the South. Maybe since the pandemic, maybe before, we've seen an influx of crime for young. And it hasn't been clear why. I'm assuming it's a financial thing. I assume when there's less money in the house, there's more opportunity for young people to go out the house and do all kinds of things. I know certainly as an attorney, we see carjackings have been big locally. Carjackings in PG County and in Baltimore, they're normally young people, and which is amazing. 13, 14, 15 years old, they have guns and they're carjacking. And so the result, the prosecution of these young people is different because they're juveniles. They're not like 17, 18, they 14, 15, 16. It's been nationwide. Have you seen another jurisdiction that handled the juvenile crime in a way that we probably could do it here in Baltimore better?
Well, to be honest with you, I've been out of the loop as far as trying to figure out what's going on in other cities and other areas. So that has not really been my focus. I just, if you look at going back to before things really got out of control, there was a lot of support services. There are a lot of nonprofits, a lot of mentor programs. And one of the things that I would suggest is, why don't we look at what's being successful and working, and how we can support those programs. What's the young man that has a program at New Shiloh?
Tyrone, not
I can't think of
Tyrone.
his name.
I know you're talking about. Yeah.
He is a very successful.
It's been there for years.
Yeah. And so the question is, where's he getting? How can we support him and maybe expand that effort with young males? It's a young male program. It'll come to me.
Before we went on the air, you were telling about a very recent tragedy involving young people. What was that about?
Well, it was a young man who was happening in Baltimore County. He was picking up food for his family, his mother and father, and his mother noticed that it was taking too long. And you know how you can identify where someone is on the phone? She went to the intersection. It was a mistaken identity where he was shot in the head. He had one of those top of the line Durango cars that was like really top of the line. Mistaken identity, shot in the head. He went to shock trauma. His name is Tyler. Tyler went to shock trauma. They operated. And he died. He was an A student from the time he was in kindergarten. In the third grade, his principal mentioned, who spoke at the funeral, that he was interrupting and it was a kid that was bullying another kid. He interceded to try to break it up and to try to talk to those young people. So back when he was in the third grade, he was doing things to mediate. He had a business. He was a barber with a partner, and he went to McDaniel College. Channel 11 did a story on him when he was playing football at City College. And they want to know, how were you able to maintain a 4.7 average? And he was a very spiritual young man, a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Oscar Brown's church. And, I attended the funeral because my great niece was dating him. And I wanted to be supportive of her and the family. But there was an example. But the point of the story was that Oscar Brown used vaping in the sermon out of James. And he said, when you vape, and he says, I don't vape, so, but people that vape, you take that puff, he used example of you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but, people use the flavor and the scent. And so that scent extends. And he used Tyler's 20 years of life and how he made an impact, that scent of the 20 years. But what was phenomenal was, one, he moved the casket from the church so that people would focus on the message and not look at the casket.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the service, after his sermon, a lot of young people came, his clients, young people who went to City College with him and college, and over 100 young men gave their life to Christ.
Wow.
That day at that funeral, and young ladies. And he said to them, things might not change overnight. Find a church, of course. If you don't find a church, you're welcome to come here. Go as you are. Don't worry about what you have on, but gave their life to Christ. And then they thanked him because he went to, shake their hands and hug them. They thanked him. They said, thank you.
Mm.
We needed this.
Is that generally what's missing in society overall? The moral leadership, spiritual leadership?
It is.
We,
you see what's happening. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We got a president that, uses the F-bomb.
Right. Right.
I mean, we all get frustrated.
Right. If you're a basketball player, they've been fined $50,000 for that.
Yeah. I think in our community, historically, the church has been a bigger anchor. They're getting less and less popular with young people. Young people don't always want to go. So the 100 young people giving their life to Christ is a huge deal.
Right.
We're seeing fewer and fewer people go to church. And for us, we need an institution to bring us together. Without that, we're a minority. We're too far and too few in between. We typically don't have much means or much wealth. We need us to walk away. For me, all we've seen is more and more poverty and less of us being able to move up. And like the young man was in college and doing well. That's not as common as we'd like it to be. Yeah.
Well, but just think about it. Most of us didn't grow up wealthy, but you didn't really know that you were really poor.
Well, they know now.
Your neighborhoods were clean.
Exactly.
Your neighborhoods were clean. You got engaged in things in your community. Yeah. There was discipline in the home. Somebody stopped me the other day, and I have a granddaughter. She's 10 months. Actually, should be 11 months. Saturday. And I'm an older grandmother compared to grandmothers today, and even though the person complimented me and said young grandmother, I'm an old grandmother compared to grandmothers today. They're great grandmothers that are younger than I am. Wow. But one of the things that I shared with my daughter and my son-in-law, I said, it's you got to set up schedules. You got to be. I did that with my kids. Y'all be surprised the stories that I shared with kids in high school and in middle school about things that I did as far as raising my kids, eliminating the cell phones and TV during the week, controlling things. That doesn't happen today.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, we live in, unfortunately, in a day and a time where truth doesn't seem to matter anymore, where we have people in positions of authority that say anything and the media repeats it as though it has credibility, as though we should take it seriously. Take it seriously for being true rather than take it seriously because it's been said by somebody who's probably bipolar.
But you know what? There's a lot of that too that's been identified.
Yeah.
Well,
bipolar, I think about some of the young people who you don't identify learning disabilities, which is not a negative thing. It's like young people who have dyslexia, but they don't know it and you don't identify.
Right.
I guarantee you, some of these young folks that they do an analysis of them who are in juvenile services who are getting into these challenges should have been identified early on. Dyslexia is just because of how you decode words. You have brilliant people who are dyslexic.
Right.
But in other factors that go on. That's why it's frustrating when you hear what it costs per pupil today Baltimore City Public Schools have what, 1 point some billion-dollar budget. Now it's what, 20 some dollars per pupil. Can you imagine if a person could take that 20 some $1,000 and use that in another school or private school?
Well, speaking of Baltimore City Public Schools, I mean, as I understand it, for some time now, D has been recognized as a passing grade. I assume that. I mean, what message does that send to young people in terms of the expectations for their ability to succeed?
Yeah.
I mean, who strives to get a D?
Right.
You know,
Well, look at the new state superintendent who came from Mississippi, which is one of the
worst,
states
yeah, right,
and worst school systems.
right.
And she instituted that if you couldn't read by the third grade, they were going to hold you back. And they're fighting that here. She wants to institute that here.
Yeah. But getting to one of Hassan's points about the financial security of the family, and understanding that kids, like everybody else, we typically covet what we see. So what do you say to the young person who sees his mother and father struggling, working every day, and still can't struggling to keep a roof over their head, struggling? I mean, they're trying to do it the right way, but they're working 2 jobs, and he never gets to really interact with them. He or she never gets to interact with them as a total family because they're never there at the same time. How do young people interpret that in terms of their life ambition?
I just think they interpret it as they want more and they want to be able to go beyond whatever the level of education and not necessarily going to college.
Right.
It might be going into a trade or IT or whatever, but wanting the ability to want more. I mean, that's always been the case in families. Your parents might not have had a college education or even a high school education, but then you wanted to exceed and do better. So one, you can help them as well as help yourself.
I'll say this, I think to Bob's point, I don't think kids are that critical. My parents, when I was a kid, I grew up in Cherry Hill. My parents were always working.
You've been in the valley, Cherry Hill Valley, not up top.
I'm down the hill. They were always working. I loved it. No, why? They couldn't watch me. They couldn't see what I was doing. When I got home from school, I was on the basketball court all day. So as a result, I didn't necessarily notice a lack in the house because they was working. It was they had to work. I didn't see, and we didn't have much money. I was one of the kids who wore no name shoes, no name clothes. I didn't even recognize. I was aloof that it was a big deal. I think the biggest issue is having inside the home a message of excellence. Whether you read them, my mom read all the time. So guess what? I read all the time, whether by choice or by force. Having in the home a message of doing more than what the parent does. I think kids are blank slates. What you feed into them, they'll take. If they're middle class or they poor, it doesn't. Your parents may not be home. You may not get those, but if you get a small nugget, it helps to push you further. So when we see kids who do better and their parents are educated, the biggest part about educated parents is they read more and they do more so their kids see it. So if you're a doctor, you may.
But even if you aren't educated or if you are not a doctor or whomever, you start reading to that.
I agree.
Child.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Because back in the day, you take them to the library, you get them engaged and involved. Our libraries are free. Yeah. They have programs within those libraries. You organize activities for them. Kids today have more choices of things than ever before.
100%.
Too many.
So that's why my thing is, we keep saying they don't have enough rec centers. They don't have da. They have more than they ever.
I think you're right on point. So if you give, whether the parents are home or not, if you give a standard, kids follow it.
Why is it that other individuals, immigrants who come here, India, Asia, Africa, and I've traveled throughout Africa based on what I used to do with the state and personally, and I always visit places if I could, a school and a prison, and the conditions of the school, multiple grades in one room. Why is it that they come here and succeed?
I think the issue, and I'm Bob, I think for immigrants in any community, whether they come here or they go to Europe, immigrants do better than the native-born population historically.
But why?
Because when you come from another country as an immigrant, you only here for one reason. You ain't here to play. You're here for one reason, and your goal is financial gain for your family. When you are born in any population, you're a part of the culture, so you don't have the same how to push or the same need. When you come from a place where so you've been in Africa, you've seen places where people. I grew up poor. I didn't grow up that poor. I didn't grow up as poor as other countries are. Like we had food in the house. It wasn't. It wasn't.
We don't know what real poor is.
Yes, we had clothes in our back. It was never. I never went to bed hungry. I never was cold. I never. So you have it's a different thing when you escape in the country where you think you're going for paradise, you're going for a better life. You push differently. So whether you're Asian, Hispanic, African, the intellect of the people don't matter. It's actually what they're pushing for.
But it's also what they, even in their countries, what their priorities are.
But you say that. Think about this. Most countries you talk about are, and I love my brothers and sisters in the continent. Most of those countries, people, the whole country is poor. So the government is poor. They have resources. Like you can pick up any country in Africa have more resources than we have in Baltimore City. Way more resources, and have people who are educated, and they still are poor countries. Mm-hmm. They still get bamboozled by the Chinese or by the French or by the Americans. Not once, not twice. Forever.
But it's never stopped.
It never stopped.
But the answer to, at least I suggest the answer to why did it succeed? Number one, when they get here, there's in many cases there's a language barrier, and talking to people who are similar, who come here for the same reason, is the only people they can really talk to, they can communicate with. And by the time they get here, the doctrine, of what it takes to be successful has already been ingrained in them. Mm-hmm. So they're not as influenced by external factors as kids who grew up trying to figure out which way to go. The problem
they also see that all the opportunities that are available here versus where they have come from.
But it's the parents. After a couple generations, they start receding. 2 or 3 generations out.
They become just like the ones who were here before. That's because when my grandmother and mother didn't have to compete with the internet for my attention. They didn't have to compete with the TV for my attention because it was black and white. My first color screen was a piece of plastic. But over there, I thought we had a color TV.
But again, even if those things are there, you still need to have control over over how much they're on their TVs and how much they're on their phones and stuff. Yeah. And particularly if they ain't paying for it.
You're right.
Of course, we didn't have cell phones. In fact, we had party lines. If you wanted to make a call, you had to tell your neighbor to get off.
I think the message, those communities, the message to their kids, you got to A, B, C, and D. And they succeed. It's not because their kids are more bright than the native born Americans. No. Yeah. So even in the household, when parents say, we're going to read, you're going to do this, it's a message. Mm-hmm. Having the family give a message. Because kids actually pretty compliant. Mm-hmm. They do what you tell them to do. Mm-hmm. They may begrudgingly do it. They may have backtalk. They actually do it. Mm-hmm. When you have a message in the family, this is the standard. It actually moves to meet the standard. I was in Baltimore City schools when they changed the grade point average from to passing being a C, and we had symposiums about it. And my thing is, I did okay in school. I wasn't the smartest kid in class, so I was certainly wasn't the dumbest. But when you give a kid a target to hit, they hit the target every time. When you reduce it, they don't reduce it. Oh, okay, I gotta do less.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So when you give more, they do more, and that's been an issue I've had with Baltimore City schools in particular. That
they don't give homework, and
what?
They don't hardly give homework. And then I thought, and maybe I'm confusing it because Jazz and Joshua went to private schools, religious schools, but they had reading lists. I thought Baltimore City and the different counties gave students during the summer reading lists of books.
The county does.
Yeah, they still do.
Yeah. Or at least they gave my granddaughter a list. She's going to Carver out in Towson. And they gave her a list of stuff that she had to read over the summer.
They more in the city. Give out
I have a son, and he was last year in city schools, and we're talking about homework. And the teacher was like, well, we think they should do all the work in class. They should know everything they need to know in school. We should have a lot of homework. I did better by having homework. I remember having to go home and mom like, where your homework at?
Yep.
And me learning stuff at home with mom at the kitchen table because I wasn't paying attention in class.
And that reinforced it.
It reinforced it, especially math. Doing it over and the routine gets you used to, not only does it get you used to doing homework, it gets your brain used to being sitting down in sedentary space doing an intellectual endeavor.
Which takes us to me, the question of truancy and absenteeism and what really causes and attracts kids to come to school, not just those who are motivated by their families. over the years, what I've seen, not just in Baltimore City, but throughout, this desire for political accountability and resulting in so-called fiscal austerity has stripped the schools of many of the kinds of activities that attracted a lot of the kids to come. They stripped the schools of a lot of the extracurricular activities. I mean, and of course, if you're not there, you can't be taught.
Right.
So one thing leads to another. So you can't let the financial accountability get in the way of the reality of the fact that the goal is to get them in the building.
Right. Because you had art, you had music, you had drama, you had, of course, the sports. I mean, shoot, when you go way back, when I went to Northwestern, and I remember my sister was at Forest Park, they had archery, rifle. You got exposed, and then you kind of focus on the areas that you were interested in.
Yeah.
Same thing when I was at Northwestern. We had the gamut, and then you pick the different clubs you want to be a part of.
And when you get
to be in school,
right, exactly. And when you get rid of those things, and all that's left is okay, you got to focus on books. Well, everybody's mind is not there at that particular point in time. Oh yeah. Focus on taking. Yeah.
I'll say this: the whole issue of focusing. I was talking to somebody about this recently. I tell you, I have a son in public school. Last year, we moved him to private school for a bunch of reasons. Just because I think he's a bright kid, I'm going to push him. And I felt like he wasn't being pushed in school. There is a big push and focus on the test, almost to their detriment, right?
Yeah.
Taking a test and knowing how to understand, like I'm big on critical thinking, and as part of for our community, young people, my big thing is we don't teach them critical thinking. So when we have young people doing squeegees, or we have young people on the corner with young people, most of those young people don't have a lot of critical thinking practice. They can build it, but they haven't had the needs for it. So they don't think critically. They do things that's very immediate versus having a long-term perspective on things. We don't really teach critical thinking skills in a way that, and I feel like it's almost on purpose. I feel like it's almost when doing slavery, and this many years back doing slavery, the idea that blacks couldn't read. You know why? Because when they read, they were able to exercise their mental capacity and think critically about things. They can read now, but nothing is critical. We have things online, they have games, they have videos, but they don't have the opportunity in class or otherwise to have any kind of critical thinking skills, which is leading to a population of young people who don't think about anything but the immediate thing in front of them. So they don't have the capacity to think, if I do this, will I get in trouble?
Right.
They don't have the capacity to, I might want to go to college. It doesn't even cross their mind at all. And I'm not sure how to get back to that. But schools have abandoned critical thinking, to my mind.
Well, the problem is not just schools, but people generally. When they say they're thinking about something, all they're really doing is trying to recall the assumptions that they've heard. They're not really did. Critical thinking means starting with a clean slate. That means not skipping steps. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 4. You got to get to 2 first. And people, that logical thing, people are taught that anywhere anymore. People are told what to believe. And if you repeat it enough, unfortunately, people will begin to believe it's true.
Yeah, my great nephew goes to 2 basketball camps. And at those camps, you pay for your lunch. They have somebody who's doing snacks and a whole host of things. And so my sister who picks him up, helping his family out, he was analyzing what it costs for the number of kids, the different costs of the snack, for the lunch. And he was analyzing and calculating how much money was being spent for that entire process. I said to my sister, I said, yeah, and math used to be a weak part of his, but he ended up becoming stronger. I said, yeah, finances sounds like the area he needs to go into. He has money in stocks and all that. He tracks that. And I said, I don't know about basketball, whether or not that's his forte. He's good at it, height-wise, but not necessarily at that height, this particular great nephew. But I said, somebody needs to push him towards finance. And he took the time to analyze, calculate all of that.
It's interesting. We're talking before the show about the draft, and we have some people from Maryland area and Baltimore to get drafted. We have young people in our community who are athletes, football players, basketball players. They make incredible salaries, more money than most people can imagine. But we have to start making a focus on other careers, and finance is a great career. They do very, very well in finance. Not many of us in finance, almost non-existent in finance. We have to focus on things. So I feel like young people don't have the perspective and critical thinking, but adults do. So when adults recognize one of their kids are talented in sports, my son has played basketball. Is he going pro? No, he probably is not going anywhere near basketball. I have to force him to sit and watch basketball. So he's not one of those kids, but he's smart. So we have to figure out their talents and try to focus our young people in directions where they want to succeed with the skills they have. It's easier to build skill you have than to make one out of a whole cloth. I think the reason we have trade schools is to say some kids are good at cooking. How about we put them in a culinary program so they can learn? This person is good at using their hands. Well, it could be a mechanic, could be a welder, could be an electrician, all of which make pretty good money.
Oh yeah, more money than a whole lot.
Yes. I'm an attorney. When I was a young attorney, I knew many of my colleagues who didn't make much money. I knew people, electricians, who did very, very
yes,
well.
They do.
So I'm like, electrician or law school, you have student loan and debt, and you're making no money. He didn't go. He went straight out of high school. He's making a killing. He can do better than you.
With no student loans.
No student loans. No student loans. And those kind of ideas, because they don't think critically, aren't even on their mind. Most young people don't want to be electricians. They don't want to be electricians. Can they do the work? Yes. Can they live a good life? Yes. They don't even cross their mind to do that.
That's like Robert Harrington, who has underground utility. He started a whole training program, and he went to Western and West Side for the
West Side Skills Center,
and the academic piece. And he started a training program. And this one summer, I think this might have been right during COVID. I can't remember, but we connected him with some high schools, and he started a summer program for people who are in the plumbing industry to introduce them to underground utility. And Robert to this day is the president of the company, but he'll go down under the ground
every day.
Yeah. Either the parents was complaining or the kids were complaining about them going down in the ground. Well, you got to go down in the ground for underground utility.
Yeah, that's you don't find many overhead water lines.
When you work with the end in mind, saying my goal is for my son to be this kind of specialist, there's not many of us around. The job is everywhere because people need it. We can get him employed. He makes some real money. He don't want to go to college. It may be a good idea for him. People don't think with the end in mind. If they did, they wouldn't be saying, "Hey, white brown," like down there and learn how to do that, so we can figure out. So once you finish high school, you can have a job and you can start taking care of yourself. That kind of thing I think is missing. So not only you mentioned,
but it has to start sooner than high school.
Yes,
you got to really look at middle school and even in some degree elementary. It's just like back in the day, we had typing. In high school, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, so we had typing. And in elementary, junior high, we had wood shop and all. I was like, why do I need some wood shop? And with typing, I said, I'm not going to be a secretary, but what? The computer. That's why we learned it. It's like shorthand.
Yeah.
There's certain skills that you learn. Home economics. People learn sewing, learn how to cook. I don't even know if they have any of that.
Yeah, right.
We had it as part of our overall academic courses.
And also back in the day, and I would be criticized for not bringing this up, but I remember when we had the 4th District Metro Organization, the 3rd District Metro Organization, and we had names like Harry Soft Shoes McGurk, and of course Mr. Adams, and those people.
And Herb Brown.
Herb Brown.
Who they just named, he was 100.
100, right.
Doesn't even look 100.
Renee sure doesn't.
That street out there.
Sure doesn't. And we had the Goon Squad and all. Largely those organizations which helped to define what Black political power meant in Baltimore City, those organizations aren't around anymore. And what has replaced them, if anything?
I don't know. I mean, you have some elected officials have their little group, like over in East Baltimore, Corey McCray and them. But I mean, no, they don't exist. We had community leaders where you couldn't run for office if you didn't go and meet with them, and they approved of you to run for office. Maggie Quell, and I can go through a whole list. I mean, you don't have those organizations anymore. I remember Kwesi when he won for Congress, and we created Impact, organization called Impact. Yeah,
and the absence of those organizations has I think resulted in the absence of a critical process by which potential leadership was really identified, and it's made it running more and more a popularity contest and not among people who just want to be elected and not people who are necessarily intending to serve the community.
No, I think we see that in national politics. Do we see that locally? Do we think people are being elected, whether in Baltimore City or in PG County or Anne Arundel County or in the state, is more popularity contest than people who actually have a desire to lead?
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, in the old days, you know, if you didn't have a record of doing something to service the community, you might as well not. You don't come out. You just couldn't wake up one morning and decide I want to be something and expect people to support you.
Yeah, Delegate Merle, what's his name? Ampry. He always brings up the fact that he worked on my campaign many years ago. James Torrance, Bill Ferguson was a teacher and wanted an internship. He came to my office. He wanted an internship. He sent out letters or emails, everybody. We were the only ones responded. He came in my office as mayor, as an intern. He went over the city, over to the school system, since he was an educator, and he created school staff. Antonio Hayes was a part of not only mine, but Salima's, but he was working in the community. I could just go through a list.
Sean Stinnett is a good.
Sean Stinnett. Nakidra, who has Black Girl Vote, used to work for me, and she was working on some other things. So, but yeah, you're right. People just come out. They don't need to.
How do we get back? How do we get back to the days where we the community? I mean, we had an active role in actually not just selecting but nurturing people to become the kind of leaders that we want, rather than waiting for them to get there and complaining about the fact that they don't do what we want them to do.
I think it's just a matter of those who are in public office making sure within their strategy and plan that they are mentoring individuals who have an interest and really kind of explain to them, look, you need to come on out here, work in the community. You know, that's what I always share with folks. What have you been doing in the community? It's just a matter of identifying people who might have that kind of leadership. We had, and I don't even know if they have it anymore. What was it? It was through a commission, the youth commission, that every district had a young person from that district, and we got them involved.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And understanding the city agencies, working in the community. That mechanism is a way to get young people involved.
Speaking of city agencies, one of the most important, I think, is the Board of Estimates. And one of the most important functions of the Board of Estimates is awarding contracts and grants and those kinds of things. And of course, it's important because of that they be transparent, that the public understand. But can you, while you were in that office, either as president of the board, as president of city council, or as mayor, can you explain how do decisions on awarding contracts get made by the Board of Estimates, at least during your tenure?
So, I mean, I would hope that it's still in the case now, where you have certain people within your agencies, based on whatever the needs are, that would assess the needs, put the bids together, and then procurement and purchasing would then put those bids out. Then based on, you would have your agencies, the mayor really is not involved or should not be involved until either a decision has been made, and then, you know, like I would get involved if it was an issue with a RFP with certain requirements that I wanted to see within that and review. But you have other people that are making the decision, and then they bring those final decisions to the Board of Estimates based on the charter, which I think needs to be changed as far as the lowest bidder. Because I think sometimes it's more the lowest bidder ends up being
the most money,
the highest bidder. But the most responsive bidder, right, I think, is a better process. And then, you know, you review those bids, and, you know, you look at what the percentages are, if it's MBE, WBE, and before it comes to BOE. But there's agency people that are reviewing those.
Do you think that And of course, over the years, particularly since the city first adopted what was then, I think, Ordinance 790, which was the Minority Business Program, there have been a number of protests over contract awards. And I would say 99% of the time, the protests are relating to the issue of compliance with the minority business requirements. Do you think that that protest issues should be separated from the board so that they can be heard and resolved in a forum where there's some sort of due process where you can have witnesses and rather than just come before the board and have a show?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think you need to have that process first and foremost. And then when it comes to the board, I think there's still an opportunity that the 3 board members, particularly the mayor, the city council president, and the controller, if there's some additional things that they need. I think if you get that, have that done beforehand, as well as allow the board, the 3 board members, if there's some additional concerns that they might have.
You mentioned 3 board members, but actually, of course, that's 5.
I know it is.
Yeah, I know you know.
But the 3, that's why I was never, I've never been opposed to having just the 3 board members.
What?
And those other agencies that support.
Right. Of course, the other 2 members are the city solicitor and the director of public works, both appointed by the mayor, at least under the current charter.
And that's why the mayor in most cases have control, except for one case with me.
Right. Right. Which raises the point that I was going to get to. Who does the city solicitor really represent? Is it like Pam Bondi, who represents Trump and not the United States? That theory? Or does the city solicitor actually represent this thing called the mayor and city council of Baltimore, the corporate entity, the citizens of which are the stakeholders? I mean, who's the client?
The client is the corporation, the mayor and city council.
But they're not one. They're separate. The mayor and city council is separate.
No. The mayor and city council is the name of the corporation.
Yes.
But so that what happens when if the city solicitor has an opinion that that opposes what the mayor wants to do? I mean, did that ever happen except for the incident?
I don't think it happened to me.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it happened.
Right.
It did happen to any other mayor, those discussions probably happened at the mini meeting.
Right.
They still have the mini meeting?
I don't think so. Well, not publicly.
Because in that, they don't?
Now, if they have it, not publicly. I don't know that it's happened. I'm not saying that they have it.
Okay, I don't know.
But
now it's every other week.
Right.
Yeah, but
yeah, I remember the mini meetings, the little side meetings, the pre-board meetings.
Right, but it wasn't a closed meeting.
You're right. No, the door was always open.
Yeah, it wasn't a closed meeting.
If I remember,
media was in there.
I remember going back to Schaefer. The door was open. If he didn't want you in there, either one or 2 things happened. Either he left out the side door, or he had the security remove you. But you can go in.
The meeting. I didn't know that.
So you guys have background. So our people watching the show from whether locally in Baltimore or otherwise don't know how we talked about it. I mean,
right.
How it works. But when we say the corporation, the mayor and city council, I don't think people recognize that the mayor is a separate person from the city council, that he can operate separately from the city council. So when you say whether the city solicitor represents the mayor or the city council or the corporation, I think it's a hard conversation. And I think the city solicitor more often than not don't evaluate it that way. They say, what did the mayor say? That's typically what happens.
It's always a conundrum when you might have an obligation to represent somebody or organization that's different from the one that signs your paycheck. That controls whether or not you keep your job. I mean, the fact of the matter is the name on the check is Mayor and City Council of Baltimore, not mayor.
But I think that if there is a disagreement, and for me, I like to hear all sides and get the right and best information.
Yeah.
And so what I might think might not be what it ends up being.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, so be it.
Everybody don't have the perspective.
But that's why you have good people around you and intelligent people that work. It's just like outcome-based budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have a process where agencies brought their budgets to the Board of Estimate. This is what we want. That's a process I was used to. And then I was introduced to budget based. It's like, wait a minute. Let's look at, you just can't come here and tell me you want this money. Why is it that you want this money? What are you going to do for the outcomes of this money? And what are we going to assess? We're going to do, so we did budget-based, outcome-based budgeting. Now, after Mr. Gallagher, who was our director of finance, left, and I can't think of the guy's name who ended up taking it over, he kind of twisted it, but to me, that's the best process because agencies then know I've got to meet these goals and objectives. Yeah. I can't just ask for this money and the police department get all this overtime, and et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm.
Well, the getting back to for a second the minority business and the city's MBE program and the state, the 47, and by that I mean Trump, has issued a series of executive orders around the issue of so-called DEI, elimination of DEI. In fact, his son just called Barack. The fact he says that the reason Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize was a result of affirmative action. but anyway, but the one of the executive orders would impose severe penalties on contractors who give any kind of preference based upon race. And that executive order applies not just to contractors, but any recipient of federal funds, which includes, of course, the city and the state. How do you think that's going to impact on the city's MBE program?
Oh, it's going to have a huge impact. It's currently now getting ready to have an impact on the federal program.
Yeah.
Because you have the 8A program and all those programs.
Right.
It's going to, and that's why in the area that I'm involved with the Maryland minority contractors and some of our other clients, you get a different perspective because a lot of companies will be out of business. Mm. That's why these general contractors that I respect who go beyond just the percentages, but they take their subcontractors with them on non-required contracts. Mm-hmm. I have more respect for those companies. But it's going to impact the minority community in a huge way.
Speaking of that, I recall having I think I recommended years ago that the extent to which a non-minority contractor, general contractor, utilizes minority business in situations where it's not required will affect its qualification to bid upon or be awarded government contracts. Because in most instances, if the goal for a particular contract is 10%, you don't see anybody coming in with 10.5 or 11 or whatever. It's strictly 10, and you're lucky if you get that in the compliant way. So that and if the goal is ultimately that to reach a time when the program wouldn't be required, that the utilization of minority business will be part of the landscape, then you ought to be able to see that utilization in situations where it's not required. Historically, adding that component as a qualification of getting pre-qualified to bid on the city has been resisted. Why do you think that's so?
You mean has been resisted from?
Has been resisted by city government as a basis for pre-qualifying general contractors. I mean, when you apply in Baltimore City, for those who don't understand, if to bid on a city construction contract, if it's over $100,000, you have to be this thing called pre-qualified. It means the city determined that you have the resources to actually perform the work. Part of that pre-qualification requires that you do certain things. You have to submit an assessment of your workforce, at least this breakdown by race and gender and so forth. Why has the city never included as a part of that pre-qualification required the contractor to disclose how much minority business participation it does outside on non-government contracts?
Because it's their private contracts that they're doing. I mean,
right.
To me, it would behoove them to do that.
Right.
I think it sheds a better light on
right.
the company.
Right.
But if you're doing a private job
and
you have your subs work with you on there, but I mean, I think it only helps you in the long run if it could be done.
Right.
But
Right.
you can't, but I don't see why you should require it.
No. I'm not suggesting that the city or any level of government could require prime contractors to utilize MBEs on non-government contracts. I'm just saying utilize the fact of whether they do or don't as a qualifying factor in terms of allowing them to participate on governmental funded activities. That's all.
I want to jump into the contractor part. That we know, as again, I'm a homer for Baltimore. We know there's a plan for Harbor 2.0 to redo Inner Harbor. As a kid, the harbor was a place where people went. I didn't go to the harbor much. We never went to the harbor, but people went. No, we ain't having money for that. We didn't go to the harbor, but we
not even walk around.
As a young kid, no.
You didn't go to Shuckers?
No.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I recall my first time downtown. I saw a Schaefer walking around downtown. My mom was like, "Oh, that's the mayor." Okay, it was weird to me even see him in person. But when I was a kid, we didn't spend much time in the harbor at all. As I got older, people went down the harbor. I went to Southern High School, so I walked past the harbor every single day to get to school.
Yeah, digital.
Digital harbor now. I still call it stuff. It's a different school, but that's when I went. But in terms of the harbor has seen a decline in recent years.
Oh, it did.
Whether the stores that Phillips and all other stores that are no longer there or have much smaller. It's a different cultural thing in Baltimore than it used to be. And I think they're trying to bring it back. David Bramble, who's African American, has I don't know if he won the contract or whether he had a conversation with somebody.
Well, it was a private.
It was yeah.
He took over. It was what was it? It went into
it was in receivership.
And he ended up buying it.
It was a multi-step deal. The city had to approve it because Harbor Place exists on city-owned land.
Yeah.
And so the city had to approve the assignment of the land lease and the city. And there were multiple components of the
But ultimately, he has a plan for Harbor 2.0. I'm looking forward to any development in the harbor. I think other cities use Baltimore in the harbor as an example, including the harbor up in PG County. I think people saw a harbor area as a way to bring in tourism. And they're using it in a way better than
National Harbor,
the one in PG County. But around the country, I was always surprised when people come from other places to come see Baltimore Harbor. I never understood why they would come for the harbor, but it's a draw. And I think they're trying to expand it out and trying to develop it. And I just want to know what your ideas about it is in terms of bringing more business and more development in Baltimore, and the fact that the primary, I guess, contractor, developer. Is a Black developer.
So, because this came up during the entire campaign, and I think that overall it's a good plan, but I'm concerned that it will become an area where the public can't appreciate it.
What do you mean by that?
Because of what he wants to do, the condos and apartments. And I think you need a balance. You need a balance of some of what was there, where it was open, where people could come down, and if you just wanted to sit down in the harbor or get some ice cream on top of, the residential piece. I think it needs a balance. And right now, I think it's going to be a gated community, but not have a gate.
So primarily residential, very limited storefronts.
And my other issue is that you go a block over in the downtown partnership area, which that's a part of it too. Baltimore Street, Calvert, those areas are dead.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are we going to do as we develop this to deal with that area as well? It's like.
That begs the question. So I didn't necessarily think that it was primarily a residential deal. I know we have a lot of things going on in Harbor East. We have things going on in Canton. And they're developing primarily residential.
Well, you have a lot of businesses from in that area that now have moved down to Harbor Point.
Yeah.
So you have
yes.
Where the Center Club is, in that building, a lot of those businesses have left.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at that general area outside of what happened with the McCoy site, which is another apartment complex, and then you're going to have Inner Harbor. I think you need a balance of a variety of businesses, and it's fine to have some condos in that area and apartments. But I think if you saturate it, it's really gonna, even though it's open to the public, it's not going to be kind of as welcoming.
I've been wondering why we have so many high value condos in Baltimore. Like, who's gonna live in them?
I'm wondering right now.
So,
Well, there's a lot of those apartment complexes
all around,
that
we
are over
getting
there.
more
Are they
apartments.
full to capacity? Or
No,
what's going on?
no,
I
they're
know,
not
but
full
what's
capacity,
going on?
no. I mean, so we've seen, I guess, in recent years, Baltimore has stopped the population loss. I think last year we
We haven't
gained.
stopped the population.
You don't think so?
Did you just look at the Banner article about the focus on the 7% whites that have moved outside of Maryland? But 2,000 African Americans in this last year have moved outside of Baltimore City.
So people are still moving out, but I thought the last numbers that we
But
gained
immigrants,
700.
that's because of the immigrants that are here. But people still are leaving.
Yeah. And that's a different conversation. So the immigrant
yeah.
conversation in housing is a whole different conversation. I'll stop that part at that point. I guess the point I wanted to ask you is, so we have Harbor Place, and it will be developed soon, redeveloped soon. We have Canton and Fells Point, other places in the city which are near downtown. We haven't seen as much development in West Baltimore. I know they're redoing Druid Park and they're redoing Hanlon Park. What more do you think could be done to help develop? In West Baltimore, I live in West Baltimore, has been seen as being blighted. The whole West Baltimore, they don't just say one. They don't just say one
Well,
neighborhood.
it's not the whole West Baltimore, but just like yesterday, Dr. K went on a tour of where the Arab young man was shot.
Yeah.
20 sometimes, right near the subway, right by the subway.
Yeah.
So she wanted to go down there. So our trainer, Chauncey, went down there with her, walked her around the whole area. And I called her show because I said, there is a lot that had started in that area. But just like I told Smoke when he did the Nehemiah project, I said, you just can't do this Nehemiah project and tear down the public housing. And now you have Heritage Crossing. You have to build out on the strength. And that's part of what we don't do. We don't look at the bigger plan and say, okay, like Druid Heights, right behind James Hammond's bakery, you have affordable housing.
Yeah.
They're on the third phase. It's an African-American development project. But you have to build on that and continue to build on it. Senator Hayes has this North Avenue Authority. I'm not sure.
West North Avenue.
Right,
Well,
it's
no,
a huge
Authority.
amount of money that,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure, because when I take that route, North Avenue, I live in Southwest, I come out the park and take that route, I'm like, okay, well, I don't see any impact on, I see people, and here again, we better be careful. You have Middle Eastern, you have Hispanic, Latinos, who are seeing that, okay, something's gonna be happening here. They're buying up houses, they're flipping them, selling them, renting them. I mean, that's happening a lot over in that area. So it's about building on the strengths, like EBDI, East Baltimore Development, Hopkins, Casey Foundation, the city came together based on Hopkins, and that whole area in East Baltimore looks like a whole nother city.
But it's not populated by the same people who lived there before.
Right, but look at what Druid Heights had done. How they made those houses are first homeowners, affordable housing. That if we would, first of all, it took longer than it should.
Yeah.
Secondly, give them the resources, because they did some development on McCullough Street, on Drew Hill. You know, enhance those areas with some resources to help them.
Yeah, this is my personal view. The operative word that you used was give, because the gimmicks eventually run out. The urban development action grants, the affordable housing reservations. Sooner or later, if you don't provide a mechanism within the control of the people, the individuals, to earn enough money to support the buildings that we're creating for them to live in or work in, then we're kicking the can down the road. And I think that politically, that's the problem. How do you take a working class? Because we always want to start at the bottom. We want to create programs for people unemployed. We want to create programs for returning citizens. We want to create programs for people come off. But what about that working class family that's doing the best they can, busting their asses every day, trying to make it? And their kids are watching them do that, and watching the frustration and the depression and the anxiety that the doctors talked about in our last program tear them apart.
Well, that's why they leave in the Baltimore City, because they can get cheaper property tax in the county.
Yeah.
cheaper car insurance.
Cheaper water bill.
Kids, cheaper water bill. Kids can go to school.
Yeah, and that's the hard part for us.
Yeah. So
you see the hand signals go by.
yeah, all right.
No, I mean you're right, but ARPA fund. I mean, man, just think if you're giving me ARPA fund back when we did things that we did in a recession.
Yeah. Well, our production crew has just reminded us that we, after having been reminded, that we've reached the 11 o'clock hour, and of course, means the end of our program. I can't. We're just beginning to get into some hot topics, I think. So I'm going to extend an open invitation to Mayor Dixon to come back at her convenience. But in the meantime, this is Money, Power, and Politics. Robert DeShiel and Hassan Barnes. Glad you tuned in. See you next week.
Take care, guys.
Y'all do this every Friday.
Yeah.
Every Friday.